All right, I think we are all set to go here. Before we start our presentation, I am going to ask Jim Sonhalter from County Planning to just give us do a brief introduction. He'll introduce the team that's on the panel here, and then we'll get going. So Jim, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Arthur, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this virtual webinar. I'm Jim Sonhalter. I'm the manager of services for the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, and I want to welcome you to our public meeting for this Community Confluence Plan. Our goal with this is to better connect the cities of Lakewood and Rocky River and the Cleveland Metro Parks Rocky River Reservation, all through active transportation improvements. And this work is funded through the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agencies Transportation for Livable Communities Initiative. So we have a number of panelists tonight, including Kelly Kaufman of Cleveland Metro Parks, Caitlin Milius and Mark Papke from the city of Lakewood, and Rich Snyder from the city of Rocky River. And I'd like to also introduce Matt Hills and Arthur Schmidt from OHM Advisors, who are going to start talking next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Before we get started, some of you may be more familiar maybe than others with this, but just wanted to go over some housekeeping items as you're joining us through the Zoom webinar, as well as those of you who are joining us on the County Planning Facebook Live page through our feed. So again, just wanted to go over just a few important features that you can use to interact with us this evening. So with the Zoom webinar, you'll see at the bottom of your screen on your tablet, or maybe you're joining us on your smartphone, you'll see a toolbar with several functions there. And this is what you can use to participate with us. The first one is the chat function. This is going to allow you to send messages. I just sent a message to everyone who's joining us on the webinar, thanking you all for joining us. You can send messages to us on the panel. You can use this function if you have questions or need a point of clarification, or maybe you're having an issue that we can assist you with in terms of the technology as best as we can. One of the other functions you'll see there is when we get to the end of the presentation, we'll have an open session for questions and answers. If you would like, you can use the raise hand function, indicate that you would like to ask a question live. You don't have to do this, but it's another option for you to interact with us and the members of the panel. You will see a pop-up come up that'll be me asking you to unmute yourself, and you can unmute your device and ask your question live to either anyone on the panel. And then the last portion, or the last toolbar that you can use, is the question and answer function. So very straightforward. This will allow you to submit any questions. You'll be able to type your questions in the box. The members of the panel will be able to see that question. It'll pop up for us. Feel free with the question and answer, as well as in the chat function, to ask your questions as we are going through the presentation. So don't feel like you have to wait to the end to submit your questions or ask your questions. Please do so as we're going through this presentation. And as I said, toward the end of the presentation, we will get to answering those questions and addressing those towards the end. For those of you on our Facebook Live feed, once again, we thank you, welcome. You two are still able to interact with all of us here on the webinar and through this virtual webinar. You will see there'll be a comment section on the Facebook Live page. Please feel free to submit your questions within the comment section. We will also be able to see those questions, and we'll address all those questions towards the end of the presentation. So very quickly, just wanted to go over what our agenda is going to be this evening. First, we're just going to do a quick project summary. Some of you have been along with us through the entire journey of this Community Confluence TLCI. Some of you, this may be your first time interacting with the project or becoming more familiar with the project. So we want to bring you up to speed with where we've been, what we've done, and how we've gotten to this point today. Then the second part, we're going to go over a lot of the plan recommendations. So we're going to really dive into a few of the key pieces, talk about them, talk about how we got led up to them, talk about next steps. And then that last part is the question and answer. So all those questions and answers, or questions that you submit to us throughout this webinar, both on Facebook Live and through the Zoom app, we will address those, and then any live questions, we'll address those as well during that time. So as I indicated before, just very quickly, we just want to reorient and refamiliarize those of you who have have joined us previously, or maybe those of you who are joining us here for the first time. So just very briefly, the map on the screen is just showing you what the basic area for our study area has been for this project, with some of the key corridors and intersections that we've been examining through this process. As Jim very well put during his opening introduction, these right here were kind of were the 6 key objectives that the consultant team and project team worked together to come to agree upon to develop as we went through this project, which was really shortening the perceived distance across the valley and between the neighborhoods and the valley. We wanted to broaden the awareness of the park's resources that are available down in the Rocky River Reservation. We wanted to reinforce the connections between the cities of Rocky River, the cities of Lakewood, along with the Cleveland Metro Parks with the Rocky River Reservation. We really wanted to humanize the pedestrian experience along several of these corridors, and you'll see that in our plan recommendations. We wanted to ensure that we were serving all populations and mode types, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing high quality multimodal connectivity throughout this study area and for each mode. As I said before, this journey started very early on in this year. For many of us, this year has felt like several years, but it's still been the same year. So we started off with our first public engagement, which we'll talk about here. We started with an assessment of the overall study area. We began engaging with stakeholders, with members of the community, you. Then from there, we started developing our plans and then re-engaging with you. And then here we are right now, where we are beginning to finalize our recommendations, finalize that engagement to make sure that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's, and then building that final report and identifying key next steps in this process. As I said before, very early on, the project team and some members of the community took part in a field audit. So back in April, we did a field audit, a field survey of those key corridors, of those key intersections, really beginning to outline what felt right, what was not feeling very comfortable, whether you were a pedestrian, whether you were a cyclist, whether you were a trail user, and so on and so forth. So went through and really evaluated what the feel was within the study area. From there, that first engagement session was a virtual workshop. We held this for several weeks up on the project website. We had 2 different surveys. We had our workshop survey, which surveyed several of the different corridors that we were beginning to study, and we wanted your feedback. And then we did a wayfinding survey. Both of those survey results were incorporated as we went through the workshop, and this virtual workshop culminated into a webinar such as this, where we kind of reported back the feedback that we heard and started indicating some of the initial recommendations. From that survey, we had over 180 responses to that survey. You'll see on the left there, the 12 segments. These are the corridors within the study area. We broke them down into 12 segments that we felt were reasonable. We felt they were manageable as we were moving forward with these recommendations based on our field audit. And we had, again, over 180 responses. And from that responses, you'll see here kind of a heat map of where we received the most responses, where we got the most feedback and the most input from. And it started with Riverside Drive as our highest segment, which was being scored, and goes all the way down to the last segment, which was segment 10, Hilliard Boulevard. Now, this is not to say that this necessarily gave us the full range of our recommendations or the input, but this was part of the piece. This is part of the puzzle for us to understand what you, the public, you, the users of these corridors felt, what you experience on a day-to-day basis, so we could bring that all together to really build a full recommendations package for this project. As I said before, the other engagement sessions was one of these Zoom webinars back in September. So from that virtual workshop, just like this, we were on the Zoom webinar, we were on Facebook Live. We were reporting back what we had heard from the surveys, from both the Wayfinding survey and the Google survey. And then we were giving our initial recommendations and answering your questions. So all of that feedback that we received from the initial engagement session, and as well as the recording of this session that was posted on the project website and shared through the County Planning Facebook page, we took that all in as we began to refine the plan recommendations that you are going to see here. And with that, I am going to hand this, this next portion to my colleague, Matt Hills. He and I are going to be going back and forth here as we go through the plan recommendations. Matt, you're on mute still.
Good evening, everyone, from my Lakewood basement. I am a fresh, new resident of Lakewood and excited to be here. And in fact, I am within or near the study area. So this is a very exciting project for me to be involved in. But as you can see on the slide here, the study area is shown, and you can see with that thin red line that the boundaries between the city of Lakewood on the east and the city of Rocky River on the west. And the boundary more or less follows the Rocky River Reservation until you get past Hilliard Boulevard, and then it gets a little convoluted there between Fairview Park, Cleveland, Lakewood, and Rocky River. Go ahead, Arthur. This version of that same map, however, shows where we ended up focusing our time and energy in this project, because there were actually more streets in this area than we had time to study. But that was okay, because if you attended some of the earlier community webinars, you will know that there have been some plans already done for certain areas of this study area, and so we didn't have to spend time on that. And so the areas in purple are what the recommended, or the list of recommendations reflect on the list on the left. We will, if you go to the next slide, Arthur, we will vote on those different recommendations later on after I introduce all the different ideas and recommendations to you. So why don't you, excuse me, in order for you to be prepared for that voting, you can go to www.menti.com. This is an online real-time voting system. And when you get there, the website will ask you for a code. Enter that code that you see there, 2192.18.7, and that will get you into the voting window. Or you can use your tablet or phone to scan that QR code, and that'll take you to the same location.
Just very quickly, if you are watching us on your tablet or your phone, you will not be able to scan and keep watching us. We've tried that before in other sessions and it doesn't work. So just an FYI. But again, you can go, as Matt indicated, to menti.com, put in the access code. You'll see the first question. We just have 2 questions on there, but the first question is ranking the priority projects that we're going to go through. And you can do this as Matt and I are going through each of these projects, just so that way it'll help remind you. And then we will bring up the results, or ask everyone to put in their final results, and then bring up the results to share with everyone as we continue through.
And this will be kind of interesting just to see what people are most interested in, but also it will help us formulate priorities in that long list of recommendations that will help both the cities and Cleveland Metroparks understand what is more important to folks than certain other recommendations. All right, so that same map now exists and will continue to exist in the upper right-hand corner of these next series of slides here. And you will see a big blue dot there. And that gives you an idea of what part of the study area we're talking about. So right now we're taking a look at the portion of Clifton Boulevard and Lake Road that goes across the Rocky River Valley. And actually, Arthur, if you could go advance one more, skip to one more slide ahead. We can talk about it here first, and then we'll go back so everybody can understand what we're talking about. Currently, for those of you who are not familiar with the bridge over the valley, it's a very wide bridge with 2 sets of very wide lanes, each one set going westbound, the other set of 2 lanes going eastbound. And in fact, it's so wide right now that there is enough room for a relatively inexpensive modification that you see here in cross section. So there is room, and I'm just going to start drawing on the drawing here so you can see what I'm talking about. There is room to narrow the existing lanes and then to stripe in a 5-foot bike lane headed both directions, one going eastbound, because that's the direction that we're looking at right now, and then the other one headed westbound. So that would be a relatively inexpensive way to modify and get people across the bridge more safely. Then Arthur, would you go to the next slide? A more desirable solution, but considerably more expensive, would be to make this larger modification to the bridge. And so now we still have eastbound and westbound traffic on one side of the bridge, but then on the other side of the bridge, we have lots of room left for pedestrians to walk and rollerblade and push their strollers and walk their dogs, and also ride their bikes. So this would be a much longer term, much more expensive solution to help people to create more space for pedestrians and bicyclists across the valley. One more slide ahead, please, Arthur. Thank you. Now, that big blue dot actually shifted on us, and it should be sitting right on Lake Road, or about this location that I marked up here. But the idea is that once you got across the bridge going westbound, we've taken a look at the existing Lake Road and feel that there is room to fit a two-way bike lane on the one side of it. And we can still have enough room for a parking lane and then one travel lane in each direction. So I imagine some of you might be asking, well, how could that ever even be possible? Arthur, one more slide forward, please, and then we'll go way back. This orange line shows the idea of what we're trying to achieve with these recommendations. You will see in a second that detailed slide that we were looking at first, but there is an opportunity here for people to get across the bridge going westbound, and then if this ramp that is not traveled very heavily were closed, that could be opened up to dedicated for bicyclists and pedestrians to go from Lake Road here and connect with this Lake Road here. So that's the big picture. How would that work in detail? Arthur, would you go back now to that earlier slide that we looked at, the first one? Thank you. So if you took a more detailed look at this, it's possible to reconfigure things in the short term with some paint, lots of paint, and a few new concrete walks here, so that people headed westbound on a bicycle could get off of the road, off of Clifton Boulevard, and down onto the closed ramp and either get to Beach Cliff and then into Old Rocky River that way, or they could then continue heading west this way onto Lake Avenue. The big issue here is that we don't want to encourage cyclists to go on Clifton Boulevard and cross over this exit ramp here. That is a very hazardous condition that we don't want to put anybody in harm's way with that type of recommendation. So that's why we're showing what might seem to some people like kind of an out of the way solution. Now, longer term, as some of you may know, the city of Rocky River did study how to reconfigure this interchange so that there is, it's less highway-like and much more city-like and more friendly to pedestrian and cyclists. That will be the longer term, much more expensive solution. This is an interim, less expensive solution. All right, Arthur, let's move on to the next study area. The next study area, as you can see in the key map on the top right, in the blue dot, is all the Clifton Roads. Even after having lived here for a long time, I didn't realize that there was a Clifton Road, a Clifton Boulevard, and a West Clifton Boulevard. Made for very confusing conversations when we were looking at how to plan this out. But this is a very complicated intersection, and we had to study this closely to see what would make the most sense to make it more safe for cyclists and pedestrians. And so our next slide shows a potential reconfiguration. If you take a look at the legend over here on the right, you'll see the keys the key labels so that so you can see what the labels on the map mean. So anywhere where you see a number 1 is a dedicated shared use path or off-road trail. There are a number of names for it, but it all means a paved, usually 8 to 12 to 16 feet wide trail dedicated for cyclists and or pedestrians. So there's enough room here on West Clifton to put a trail on the east side, and then to widen this existing sidewalk north of Clifton Boulevard into an all-purpose trail or shared use path, and then take that continuing to the west of Clifton Boulevard. You'll also notice that right now, as you're aware, there is a two-way bike lane on Clifton Boulevard here that's just delineated with paint striping on the pavement and the vertical barriers. What this more long-term plan is calling for is to narrow the road so that we have more room for an all-purpose trail here that would be separated from cars. This also calls for the median to be shifted to the south. And then we have some shortened distances for pedestrians to go across all the different Cliftons to make for an easier, shorter distance to cross. Thank you. Now, as you can see, we're kind of going in a clockwise manner around the study area. Our blue dot is now on West Clifton Road. And what we are calling for here is a reconfiguration primarily of the area on the east side of the road. There is enough room here, since it's such a wide right-of-way and there are big tree lawns, that we can squeeze in an 8 to 10 foot wide shared use path. And as you guys probably saw in previous webinars, an all-purpose trail or a shared use path is really the most preferred bicycle facility because you're separated completely from vehicular traffic. And so it's most comfortable for the widest variety of users. The goal, the term you may hear these days is age 8 to 80. We want this to be as accessible to as young a user as possible, all the way up through as old a user as possible. All right, Arthur. Now, if we continue heading south, we intersect with Riverside Drive. And here is the all-purpose trail that you saw before, still heading along on the east side of West Clifton Boulevard. And once we get to Riverside Drive, we are transferring to a two-way on-street bikeway, what we're calling a two-way separated bike lane, to head east and or south as Riverside bends around the Racker River Valley. Go ahead, Arthur. Once you would be on Riverside Drive, you here in section is that two-way separated bike lane, and there's still enough room to have a lane headed both north and south on Riverside Drive and still allow for parking on the east side of Riverside Drive. That's the short-term recommendation looking northbound on the top. On the bottom, what would be a more preferable solution would be an all-purpose trail or a shared use path in place of the two-way separated bike lane with a planting buffer separating the users from the roadway. And that would add a higher level of comfort and would accommodate more users. As you see in the top right key plan, that condition would exist in 2 locations on Riverside Drive, where those blue dots are shown. Go ahead, Arthur. As I mentioned before, there was only so much time to spend analyzing and looking at specific configurations. And in this area, we ended up looking at several different configurations. And then with the city of Lakewood, finally arrived at this solution here. So just in case you're not sure what you're looking at, Interstate 90 is running east-west down here, and here's Riverside Drive going predominantly north-south there. So what you see here is we were just looking at the Riverside Drive section that's shown here, where it would be an on-street separated bike lane or an all-purpose trail. And what we would do then is connect to the existing bike lanes on Madison Avenue. What we found is there is a pinch point at Interstate 90. The bridge on Riverside Drive that was just recently rebuilt within the last couple of years was rebuilt with a sidewalk and then 2 lanes of traffic, one each direction. But it really wasn't built wide enough to accommodate a full bicycle facility. And so what the project team had to do was figure out the best way to route people from this northern portion here south and eventually get them to Hogsback Lane and down into the Rocky River Reservation. So the city of Lakewood decided that what makes the most sense is to take people, I'm going to clear all my scribblings here so you can see better, is to take people along Madison Avenue and then down McKinley with Sharrows to Hilliard Road. Now Hilliard Road will be resurfaced within the next few years. It's about to be starting to be redesigned right now for resurfacing. And as part of that project, there will be bike lanes. It's anticipated that bike lanes will be installed on Hilliard Road in this area where I just drew. So that's how the routing would connect from McKinley to Hilliard along those bike lanes, and that would get you back to Riverside Drive. Once you're at that intersection of Hilliard and Riverside, then you would rejoin that separated bike lane or shared use path on Riverside to get to Hogsback. Now, speaking of design and construction, another project that is under engineering and design right now, actually, if you could go back for a moment, Arthur, is the Hilliard Road Bridge. And that is being engineered as we speak. Also, when the city of Rocky River did its master plan with Jim Sonnhalter a few years ago, it was determined that it would be desirable to narrow Hilliard Boulevard west of the bridge and add a shared use path on the south side. So what our goal is to connect those future users of that path with Riverside Drive. And so the engineering team for the bridge itself is looking at options of how to get people from the west end of the bridge to the east end of the bridge, and then either south or north. All right, Arthur, thank you.
Matt, really quick, we should note that on the priority list, this intersection overall is not listed as one of the priorities that you can vote on. And that's because we wanted to kind of zoom back out here a little bit and show the greater picture of some of the recommendations that we have been speaking about. As Matt indicated, Riverside Drive. We'll see here in a little bit the Wooster Hilliard Boulevard intersection along with Rock Cliff entrance. But again, just wanted to kind of zoom us back out here to kind of see the overall picture on how some of these interventions and recommendations are intertwining with, again, existing planned projects such as Hilliard Road, such as the existing bike lanes on Madison and the proposed bike infrastructure on McKinley through the city of Lakewood. And as Matt pointed out, the recommendations that came out of the city of Rocky River's master plan with respect to the all-purpose trail shared use path along Hilliard Boulevard.
Thank you, Arthur. Now heading south on Riverside Drive, south of Hilliard Boulevard and the bridge, that same section of a separated bike lane and or a shared use path along Riverside Drive would continue. And then that dedicated bike shared use path would proceed down Hogsback Lane to connect with the Valley Parkway. We have on the next couple slides some enlargements of those, of how that would look and how that would work. If you could go, Arthur. So this is this. If you see this key plan here, what you're looking at currently is the section of Riverside Drive between Hilliard and Hogsback Lane. It's the same thing that you saw before. Short term is the two-way separated bike lane. Long term is the shared use path. And then once you get to Hogsback Lane, this would be a similar situation to what's built on the Rockside entrance down into the valley on the, to the west of here at, I'm sorry, not Rockside, but Rock Cliff. And so it would be a very similar situation to that one there. All right, so continuing clockwise around the study area, you can see the blue dot now is at Worcester Road and Hilliard Boulevard. This is an existing aerial that shows you what's going on currently, just so that you can compare to the next slide that is showing what recommendations we are making for reconfiguring this intersection a little bit. So the primary adjustments that we're showing here are the narrowed Hilliard Boulevard that we referred to earlier as one of the recommendations in the city's master plan. And then as a result of that narrowing, we have enough room to put the shared use path in south of the Hilliard Boulevard area. Also at the intersection itself, I think if we go to the next slide, we have an enlargement of that intersection, right, Arthur? There we go. Oh, back up one, please. Thank you. You can see that all-purpose trail or the shared use path there. We also are calling for what's currently a travel through turn lane here to cut that off and to bring in the curb at this point here so that we have a shorter, much shorter crossing distance for pedestrians. I watched a mom with her, pushing her stroller across that very wide Hilliard Boulevard a few months ago, and it was a little nerve-wracking to watch her venture across. But then this all-purpose trail could then continue further south, and if you go to the next slide, Arthur, you will see, the viewers will see that that trail can continue. And then we are looking at a way to squeeze either a two-way separated bike lane or a shared use path along the south edge of Rockcliffe here. We know it gets very tight in here, and so certainly we would not propose anything that is outside of the right-of-way or causes any difficulties with that. Even in the super short term, if we go to the next slide, there are some very inexpensive ways to improve the pedestrian experience at this intersection. Here's just an example of how you could put a enhanced crosswalk in, which in this case, the example we're showing is an elevated crosswalk, which slows down vehicular traffic and also prioritizes the pedestrians going across Rockcliffe Drive. That's just an example of smaller interventions that you can make in order to make for a more pedestrian safe and pleasant experience.
And Matt, if I can chime in, that short-term enhancement is directly correlated to some of the responses and feedback we got, not only from the public, but from some of the other stakeholders and the city as well, in terms of just concern of the speed that individuals were going at in this section, and the users who were trying to gain access to the reservation. If you take a look at the key map, this Rockcliffe Drive entrance is a key entrance for individuals south here to enter into the Rocky River Reservation if you're in those neighborhoods here. So this again is just a kind of a response to that, a well-formulated, I think, response and a really good observation that was delivered to us. And the other thing I just wanted to point out and reinforce, I'm going to go back here to this overall one. So the shared use path along Worcester Road, and again, the shared use all-purpose trail along Hilliard Boulevard, both of these are taken from, again, that city of Rocky River's master plan developed. So as Jim was pointing out earlier, as well as Matt and myself, we're really focusing in on the gaps that were there within the network, built from, we analyzed the existing plans, both from Rocky River, City of Lakewood, Cleveland Metro Park. So we were really looking at how can we fill in the gaps and what recommendations can we do to elevate those existing planned and proposed infrastructure projects.
Right, and before you go on, Arthur, I'm sure Jim is wanting us to point out this all-purpose trail or the shared use path that we're showing along Wooster Road. That was one of the recommendations of the city master plan, but this plan shows how that might fit in there. That bridge over Interstate 90, I think it's 5 lanes wide right now, which is absolutely huge. And so there's plenty of room to put a shared use path in there. That would proceed north, which we will see after we get past the enlargements and past this one. If you continue north, let's look at our blue dot right now. There is a wonderful opportunity for an overlook of the Rocky River Valley at this general location shown by that blue dot. Now, would it necessarily be this big or this dramatic? Who knows? The point is that there's a great opportunity for an overlook at this point. And so some type of overlook should be considered and will be recommended as part of this report. In the bottom corner of the rendering here, you will see the all-purpose trail that is planned as part of the city's master plan as well. Just another slide or two shows what this might look like at nighttime too. It is an opportunity for people to enjoy in the evening as well.
You also see as we go to our next one, there's an opportunity too for education to talk about the history of the Rocky River Valley, the reservation, the cities, yes, as Matt is highlighting on there. So looking at ways to also bring light to that and use it as an educational tool as well.
All right, one of our final, final areas that we have been studying is the Detroit Avenue Bridge going across the Rocky River Valley. And if you were standing near the west end of it looking east, this is what it might look like with this recommended reconfiguration. What we're showing here is that the vehicular traffic is moved primarily or all the way to the north side of the bridge, and we're creating more space here on the south side for bicyclists on a dedicated separated bike lane, and then the pedestrian zone is over here. And there's plenty of room still to maintain traffic going both directions along with a center turn lane. The next slide shows what that pedestrian zone could look like closer up. There's another great opportunity to look out over the Rocky River Valley. Very attractive view down to the Rocky River Reservation Marina, and also just more fun things to look at with river users, fisher people, the condominiums there. Lots of fun things to look at. As you go down into the Rocky River Reservation from the Sloan Avenue Detroit Road intersection, you head down the drive here on the Parkway. You pass by the parking lot for the marina, and then you go past the treatment plant entrance and the dog park. And for those of you who are frequent users, you know that when you're on the trail, you have to cross at this point to get onto the trail on the other side of the road. That is a little bit of a treacherous situation there because cars and cyclists actually tend to go very fast heading south because they're coming down that hillside. And then for vehicles coming from the south, it's a bit of a blind corner there. So what we recommend on the next page is some more advanced warning and notification of pedestrians crossing. These are called rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Really fancy name for this flashing light that is very bright and catches motorists' attention after someone pushes the button on the post here. And so with signage ahead of these signs and these flashing lights, motorists are much more aware of pedestrians crossing the road at where these signs and beacons are. So this would improve that crossing condition there, make it more safe and more comfortable for pedestrians and trail users. Some of you might be thinking, well, gosh, some of these intersection reconfigurations you're proposing seems like they would kind of choke up the traffic and create traffic jams. Is this really, are these really a good idea? Can this still work with only 2 lanes where you might have had 4 or 5 before? And so what we have done is we did look at all these recommendations from a traffic analysis standpoint and said, will this work? We have traffic engineers on our team who crunched all the numbers and put all these different ideas into modeling software to see whether things still operate appropriately. And so we'll just quickly take you through this to show you that, yes, we have indeed looked at this. So back to the Clifton Boulevard Bridge, what we're proposing is in the long term, narrowing it, cutting it down to 2 lanes from 4 lanes. And if you look at it west of the bridge in Rocky River, there actually is only 2 lanes, one headed east, one headed west. The same condition exists now with the striped bike lanes east of the bridge, where there is only 1 lane headed east, 1 lane headed west. We took a look at the numbers as well and determined that this is not going to be a problem. Same thing for the Detroit Avenue Bridge. Currently today, the lanes both west and east of the bridge is only 1 going in each direction. So 1 westbound lane, 1 eastbound lane. No problem with reducing this to 2 lanes only, because you're not really choking down the condition from either end of the bridge. Now, in some of these situations like this intersection, we had to get more technical and run the numbers through the model and make sure that, yes, that really does work. We did that. And if you're not so sure about it, you can go to the next slide and take a look at all these numbers. And I'm not even going to spend time getting into it because I don't want to bore people. But the point is that we have looked at this, we have crunched the numbers, we have determined that all of these intersection modifications here do work, and it still meets an appropriate level of service as defined within the usable standards of the intersection. Same thing for here. Now, when we did, we originally had shown in this condition, we had shown, I think it was a dedicated right-hand turn lane here and only 1 lane going forward. When we did the traffic analysis, we figured out that, no, that doesn't quite work. That does create a problem. And so we modified what we're calling here for here on this reconfiguration so that we weren't creating a problem. So, you know, that traffic analysis was important, and we did find in certain instances where we had to throttle back some of the modifications. What you see here, though, still works. And I think we have one more to talk about, which is this one here. I forget if we had a chart after this. Yes, we do. Okay. So this is being studied. If you go back to the plan, Arthur, this is already being studied as part of the bridge rebuilding project. So any changes that are made on the bridge will not be done and will not adversely affect traffic. We also took a look at this intersection based on some other data that we had, and we determined that everything will be okay here as well. That's it for me for now. I'm going to pass it back to Arthur to talk a little bit about wayfinding before we wrap it up.
Yes, so before we get into wayfinding, because we're going to be approaching our Q&A portion, as well as where we'll be utilizing the interactive survey, for responses from all of you. So those of you who are on that interactive survey, continue to kind of identify your list from top to bottom. And those of you who are joining us both on the webinar and through Facebook Live, please, if you have any questions and you're on the webinar, use the chat or Q&A function to submit those questions into us as we finish things up here. And we have received a few questions on our Facebook Live feed. So if you're on our Facebook Live feed, please submit please indicate those questions in the comment section, and we will get to those here in just a moment. As we were talking about before, when we were talking about wayfinding, one of the elements that we were looking at, and we discussed this a little bit more in previous webinar sessions and virtual workshops, was just beginning to understand from a user perspective, and that's why we had that individual wayfinding survey. From a user perspective, what was working, what wasn't working, where there needed to be improvements to signage, to gateways in terms of being able to identify where you are at. As we've talked about here, I mean, we are kind of at that confluence of the Rocky River Reservation, the city of Rocky River, the city of Lakewood, right? And even to the south, the city of Cleveland. So really trying to understand, you know, where you're at, where you're trying to go, and just all the different signage that comes with that. And so through that survey and through our interactions through the workshop and through the webinars, what our teammates from Guide Studio did was kind of build a wayfinding summary and recommendations. So as you'll see here on the screen on the map, each one of these lines indicates a specific system that is indicated on the left. So the colors correlate to one another. And it's made to just ensure cohesiveness in terms of the users and the ability to find their way from point A to point B and even beyond to point C and D, right? So as you see on there, the dark blue or the blue indicates the Cleveland developed trail sign system that has been used for the Cleveland Lakefront Bikeway. So this program has been adopted to highlight that trail. And so through our interactions and our discussions, it's that recommendation that we use that Cleveland Trail sign system along Clifton Boulevard, down Lake through Wooster as we're entering the southern portion of the Rocky River Reservation, and then alongside, or then along Riverside Drive as future infrastructure projects are developed. Along Detroit, we have the Lakewood sign system, so maintaining that sign system through the city. Likewise, as we cross over into the city of Rocky River, the city of Rocky River sign system, that too goes along with Hilliard Boulevard. And then the Cleveland Metro Parks has their distinct signage. So making sure that that signage, which is exists along the Valley Parkway and the Loop Trail down in the reservation, making sure that that's maintained. And then more specifically, as we enter that key intersection, as Matt was talking about before, of Valley Parkway, Detroit and Sloan Avenue, that it's also made clear that's kind of that intersect, right, of these different sign systems. So just making sure that it's clear to the user where they're at, where they're heading, and where they want to go. This is beneficial not only to the user, but it's also beneficial to the end users, which is the two cities, as well as the Cleveland Metro Park system. So that way they understand where they're going and where they're trying to head towards. So with that, this is just a recap of that priority projects list that's listed down in there. You'll see the 8 projects that are listed. These 8 projects are associated with those 8 projects that are listed on the interactive survey. So these are the 8 projects that we want to hear what you feel are the priorities. So you're going to rank these 8 projects from 1 to 8, 1 being the highest and 8 being the lowest, based on what you'd seen through the recommendations, based on your personal experiences and your personal use of maybe some of these systems moving forward. So we just want to bring up once again how you can interact with the website, and then we'll switch over to Matt so we can see the poll results coming live. For users on our Zoom webinar, again, you can go to menti.com, enter in that access code, which is 2192187. I feel like I'm at a bingo hall here with that number series. Same with those of you who are watching us on the County Planning Facebook Live page. You can go to menti.com, enter in that access code, and you should see as you enter that in the first question being popped up, which is asking you to rank those elements or those priority projects, or through the use of your smartphone or tablet. If you're not using it to watching us right now, you can scan that QR code and that'll take you directly to that website as well.
Arthur, would you go back to the plan so people can reference those numbers again?
Yeah, we'll keep this up here just for a moment. Are people logging in or using?
Yes, yeah, people are voting. It's fun to see the changes.
Yeah, and we'll bring that up here in just a moment, where I just want to give everybody the opportunity to see the projects on the map. The projects names are listed on that survey, so you're able to see all the projects, but we want to give the opportunity to actually see the projects on the map just for a better reference and a better understanding of where they're all located. Matt, when it starts to slow down, let me know, and I think then we'll flip over.
Okay. We can flip over.
Flip over. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that, and then it should.
All right. Do people see the Menti screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I can.
Good. Good. So far, those of you who have voted, and you can see it changing as people vote. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see number of people who are inputting their information, their votes. And as people hit send or save or enter, you can see the rankings change.
And just so everyone knows too, we are going to be, in terms of next steps as we move forward, we are going to be posting the recording of this session on the project website through the county planning page. This video will also be available to individuals to be rewatched through Facebook Live. And so we will have, while not this interactive version of the survey, we will have this survey available to individuals to give their input in terms of the order of importance. And then it doesn't seem to be growing anymore. Matt, if you want to go to click to the next question. The next question we want to ask those of you who are with us is, if you had to select one project, so of those 8 projects, if you had to select one to be implemented within the next 2 to 3 years, which would it be for you? So again, this is just trying to get an understanding of which one kind of jumped off the page maybe for you, or which one individuals who are using this seems to make the most sense to them. Again, just trying to get a barometer of that. And again, we will be posting these questions. We will be posting the slideshow up. So we'll have more input and give everybody more opportunity to give their input for this.
The panelists should participate as well. As a resident, I participated. It was fun.
And as we go here too, as you're participating on the interactive survey as well, those of you who are on Facebook Live as well as on the webinar, again, if you have specific questions, we've gotten a few of them here in on the webinar, and again, a few more on the Facebook Live session as well. Feel free to submit your questions into us. For those of you who I'm going to be talking to the future individuals who are watching this video over the next couple of days, either through Facebook Live or on the project website. If you are watching this and you're not watching this live with us, you will be able to see a link to participate in this survey on either the project website or on the County Planning Facebook page. So fear not, you'll be able to participate in this poll and give your input related to your priority from highest to lowest for these plan recommendations, as well as to this question: if you had the opportunity to select one project to be implemented within the next 2 to 3 years, which of these 8 projects would that be? So Matt, I think as we see, we didn't get a chance to talk about the last one, but very clearly jumping out that the Clifton Boulevard Lake Road recommendation seems to be a high priority for individuals for implementing that in the immediate term.
Indeed.
I guess very quickly too, while we're on this, members of our panel, anybody have any thoughts or comments to it as you're seeing kind of the results coming in live here? Feel free to just feel free to unmute yourself and just jump in with anything that maybe is jumping out to you. I feel like, Rich, not to put you on the spot, but this was the Clifton Boulevard Lake Road. I know you're laughing. You know I was coming towards you. But the only reason I point that out is because, in our last virtual webinar workshop session, I feel like we were discussing this Clifton Boulevard Lake Road recommendation quite a bit when we were going through the initial configuration of this.
Right, and we do have, this is definitely an opportunity to see some short-term results. We are in the process of next year repaving those marginals coming off of Lake Road. And then as part of that, we are going to be realigning the sidewalk that goes from the West Clifton area down to Lake Road below the bridge to eliminate a crossing over the marginal there. That's an immediate project that's on the radar. And then we did also apply for a TLCI grant for some improvements to pedestrian crossings, multimodal transportation down below. And then, this is something that we can definitely, do in the short term. We also recently passed a resolution with the City Council to designate Lake Road as a national bike route. So, we are all kind of working towards this project as something, we recognize that the need is there and we're working towards that along the way here. I think the big key to making that big change is going to be the Marion ramp itself. It's kind of been up in the air for a long time. So, that does still receive a fair bit of use from vehicular traffic going to Clifton and then Detroit. So, making some of those interim changes, short term, we can do, it's going to be a little trickier with some of those long-term changes to eliminate, to really make that interchange overall safe for, a lot more different users.
And Rich, I think that's important to quickly highlight what you're talking about, not only in that intersection, but as Matt was going through the recommendations, we were, for the most part, we were showing kind of the final recommendation or the long-term recommendation. Here and there, we were showing some of the short-term, but with each one of these recommendations, and Matt chime in here, there are very short-term options that can be done just to start changing that look and feel of some of these corridors and of some of these key intersections that are not costly, that can begin to change the behavior and set the tone for those long-term recommendations, like you were talking about, Rich, with this intersection in particular, but with a lot of these plan recommendations. And I think that was, as we've been going through this process, something that we've been hearing from those who've been participating, not only in the survey, but in the workshops and in the webinars, that, loving the long-term visions for these, but what can we do in the interim, right? What can we do in the immediate term to start changing that behavior, to make it start feeling safe sooner rather than later in some instances. And even that Rock Cliff entrance with the crosswalk and the raised crosswalk, again, kind of that, hearing that and responding to it in that way with that type of short-term recommendation.
Right. This is more than a confluence of communities working together. This is a confluence of projects working towards a greater goal. And by doing some of these, something as simple as just a pedestrian crosswalk, what you're doing is you're helping change a frame of mind to create that focus on pedestrians as a priority. And you don't realize it until you actually are in a vehicle and you drive over one of these just raised crosswalks, and it's very, very minor, just a matter of just inches, but you realize it. I live adjacent to the city of Oberlin, and Oberlin College is there, and they have recently done some resurfacing work, and they've added these raised crosswalks, and it really does, as you drive those areas, you're taking the focus. You realize, instead of it being a roadway, it's a pedestrian crossing. So it takes that focus towards the pedestrians away from the vehicles.
Arthur, do we have any other parts of the presentation before we formally open it up to conversation?
No, are you able to, just very quickly, could you share the responses from the first question if it's still active? Because we kind of jumped to the second question. I want to be able to just get initial reaction. So if you go back to the first one, I'm just curious of what that, okay. So again, this was asking again to rank the projects, and this is also to give our panelists an opportunity just to see the initial ranking. Again, this question will be made available to individuals who watch this after the fact, either through Facebook or through the project website. So there'll be additional responses that'll be added to this, but I just wanted to have an initial reaction to it. So Detroit Road Bridge, Clifton Boulevard and Lake jumping out as the top two out of our group who's responded with us, followed by the Woosterd Hilliard interchange, Clifton intersection, Riverside, Hogsback. Okay. But before we get, because we've gotten some questions submitted to us, so before we get to those questions and get to our formal Q&A period, again, and I won't pick on you, Rich, this time, I promise. But anyone else from our panelists, again, just any reactions, any comments to seeing this list? I know it's just a small portion, and we'll be seeing additional input, but even just an initial reaction to the list, if anyone has any comments or wants to jump in there.
I'll jump in for a sec. I think one thing that the prioritization...
Sorry to interrupt you, but would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, sure. My name's Kelly Kaufman. I'm a planner with Cleveland Metro Parks. So it's been great to be part of this discussion. And I was just going to say the thing that jumped out to me during the prioritization exercise is the beauty of this plan is that it's really all a connected system. So it's really hard to just pick and choose, pieces and parts. Of course, implementation is going to take place over, a number of years, but it's really going to lead to an exciting network, great improvements for bicyclists and pedestrians.
Does anybody from the city of Lakewood want to make any comments, or Jim?
I guess just from our point of view,
I'm sorry, Caitlin, to interrupt you, but would you mind introducing yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm a city planner with the city of Lakewood, Caitlin Milius. The Detroit Road Bridge coming in first on this piece is interesting. I think that would connect nicely into the work we're doing, Detroit to Graber, coming up in 2021. So I think there will be a lot of opportunities once we've kind of spearheaded it with the project that we're going to install to better connect Rocky River downtown to the metro parks, but also so that we can travel over to Pinens or other places in Rocky River and really kind of create a unified, interesting area to visit there with the entrance to the Rocky River Reservation. So I think that's an exciting project that can build off of what we're already doing on the Lakewood side.
Jim, last but not least, if you want.
I just really want to thank everybody, those who are attending this, our consultant team and our partners. and really appreciate the enthusiasm and the local knowledge that's been brought by everyone to this project, because that's really what we need to make these projects happen. So however they're prioritized, I know that everybody's going to be working together and really bringing their best efforts to make these connections. So thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So really quick, we've gotten a couple of questions. So I want to make sure that we address the questions that have been submitted to us, both through the webinar and through Facebook Live. So one of the questions that we received that I'll kind of kick us off with through Facebook was, just wanted to clarify a few pieces of the early engagement. I know I kind of quickly went through that as we were discussing it. So not only did we have the 2 surveys where we showed those respondents, but through the virtual workshop, we had a large number of individuals joining us in submitting their comments as users of the trails and of the infrastructure networks. As Kelly reminded me, we had several different yard signs out throughout the different trails within the study area with QR codes, which gave individuals opportunities to kind of give their accounts of, as they're on the trail, whether they're walking, whether they're biking or running, whatever it is they're doing, to give us kind of some real-time responses of how they feel. So when I was talking about earlier doing the field audit, it wasn't just members that you're seeing here of the project and consultant team, but it was also members of the community who were giving their feedback as well through that field audit in real time. So we were getting our feedback from there. We were also getting our feedback again from the virtual workshops and from the virtual webinars. As is going to be the case with this, we had kept the recording of our presentation, presentation of the results of the survey and the feedback and the recommendations up on the project website, as well as on the county planning Facebook page. So we received additional comments through there. So I just wanted to make it clear that the survey responses were not just the only responses that we received as we went through this process, that we were really engaging not only with members of the communities of the city of Lakewood, of the city of Rocky River, but also key users of these trails and the kind of the constituents of the Metro Parks, right? We have a lot of users who use the different Metro Parks facilities. So it was not just input from the communities themselves, it was also input from the users of these facilities and of these infrastructure pieces. So I wanted to make sure that we made that clear.
Arthur, I can field these next couple other questions here in the Q&A.
Sure, go ahead.
There are 2 different, do the participants see the questions or just the panelists?
I think everyone can see the questions.
Okay, so in case someone is not able to see it for one reason or another, there were 2 questions, both with the very similar topic about time frame. One question says, what's the time frame improvements like investments in a mutual fund, make them early, make them regularly, and our communities reap bigger dividends sooner? The other question is, are all 8 priority projects approved for future improvements? What is the approximate timeline to start and finish? So would someone from the city of Rocky River, or someone from the city of Lakewood, and then Kelly, since you are the Metro Parks representative tonight, would each of you answer these in whatever way is most appropriate for you? Rich, do you want to start first? Or Caitlin, I see you're off mute. Go ahead.
I can go first, and I see those questions are from both of our council people. So we don't have all of these projects on a specific time frame for investment. This planning process really identified what those projects would be. So after this planning process, it is up to us to figure out how to incorporate it into our capital plan and further plan for these investments. Obviously, this study was timely because we have investments going on at Detroit, Sloan to Graber that are being constructed next year, and then the Hilliard Road Bridge. And we wanted to make sure we weren't missing those opportunities as those investments were being made. But for the rest of the projects, we do not have a specific time frame. It would be up to us to kind of start thinking about how we can incorporate that into our capital plans.
Rich?
Yeah, just to kind of mirror that, you know, we were utilizing this to help us kind of prioritize some of our projects going forward. But, you know, the opportunities that have arisen with the bridge replacement on Hilliard, we're going to capitalize upon that to really look at making some improvements to Hilliard Boulevard between Worcester and the bridge with the multi-use trail and the road diet. Also, you know, some of our short-term improvements up at the West Clifton Lake Road area kind of ties in with some other work we're doing in downtown Old Detroit area. And then with our, again, with Lake Road becoming a national bike route, some of those things are all tied in. Additionally, you know, some of the things, a lot of this stuff was outlined in our master plan that was recently done. But, you know, we're working towards these. We're looking at potentially putting in a neighborhood park along Worcester Road at Shoreland Avenue. So it kind of makes sense as we go through these things, you know, if that's in place, that's just one more thing along the way for the multi-use trail that's along Worcester. So, you know, we have some of these short-term things that we can do, all working towards these overall larger projects. But again, you know, nothing is necessarily scheduled for the larger projects, but this will help us prioritize those and work towards them, you know, down the road.
Kelly, do you have anything you want to add?
Just that we'll continue to coordinate with our partners and projects in the area. We'll look for, I think, outside funding for some of the improvements that are within the park itself, whether it's the recommended crossing improvement or, you know, Hogsback is a major project. We know improved access is needed there. It's just a pretty major undertaking. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. There was a question in the chat that states, would improvements for the intersection of Detroit, Sloan, and Valley Parkway be part of the Valley Parkway improvements or Detroit Road Bridge? That is an area that is quite problematic for me. So that was one part of a two-part question. I can answer this, and then Caitlin, please feel free to backfill me wherever I missed. But I'll share the screen here so you guys can, so everybody on the call can understand what's going on. As Caitlin mentioned earlier, in 2021, the city of Lakewood will rebuild the portion of Detroit Avenue from the bridge, eastern end of the bridge to Graber Drive. So this area that I'm outlining with my cursor now will be rebuilt. And so that will include the entire intersection of Sloan, Valley, and Detroit Avenue, and then we'll go to the Detroit Extension intersection and up to the Graber Drive intersection. So the Detroit Avenue improvements that have been shown here tonight would be an entirely separate project and not part of that reconstruction. Caitlin, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I saw that question was from Emily. We are adding a two-way bike path along Detroit from Valley Parkway to Graber that will add better bike connection to the Metro Parks trail there. So that's part of the plan, and we can make sure that that's shared with the Bike Lakewood community as well.
Thank you. The second part of the question was, I'm very interested in learning more about the transitions, what the transitions will be like when going from a bike lane that is unidirectional, like on Madison, or bidirectional, like is proposed for Riverside Drive. So that is always a very important area of bicycle facilities to study and design carefully, because anytime you have a transition is a potential for danger. It's an adjustment that the user has to make, and it's a point of where you have to be very careful about how you design it. In every situation, that transition is different. For instance, when we were talking about Clifton Boulevard and Lake Avenue and the transition to the bike lanes, that is something that would have to be studied more carefully. In fact, Arthur, would you mind going back to that slide early in the presentation? I'm going to stop sharing here.
Yeah, decide where you want me to go to specifically.
It's towards the beginning of the recommendations where we're talking about Clifton Boulevard and Lake Road.
Yeah, let me get it set and then I'll share my screen here.
Great, thank you. So if you would go, Arthur, to where we're showing the orange line on the plan, that's about 4 or 5 slides down. Okay, thank you. So here's an example of what I was talking about, where there's a transition here in this concept between an on-street facility that's I think it was a two-way on-street facility, to separate bike lanes. What we try to do is locate those transition points at intersections like Linda Street here. And so you can coordinate the crosswalks and pedestrian crossings with that transition in bike facility more easily, more clearly, and more safely. Another situation where we had a transition, I think, in fact, the question was addressing if you, Arthur, you would go to the Riverside and that intersection with Riverside and yeah, that's good. So we have a transition here between a shared use path and an an on-street two-way bicycle separated bike lane. So in this situation, the concept is showing not only a clearly marked crosswalk here, but also some buffer islands here, along with a transition in the striping to guide motorists past this area here where that actual transition takes place. So we use a number of different methods and tools to help the motorists understand what's going on and to guide them through the transition. Because there's not only a transition for the cyclists, but there's also a transition for the motorists. And so through, as clear as possible, pavement markings, islands, signage, and even paint colors and different materials, we try to communicate as clearly as possible to both user groups how to navigate it so that everybody is safe at the end of the day. In fact, the bicycle boxes that were just installed down on Lake Avenue, as an example at Bell Avenue and Lakewood Park, that's a perfect example of change in pavement color through the green paint. That symbolizes a transition at that intersection where it is intended for cyclists to sit and wait for the light to change. And then cyclists have the right to go first on a left turn into Lakewood Park, for instance, if you're headed east on Lake Avenue.
And Matt, to build off of that too, that you pointed out the signage. So when we were talking about what we had heard from participants throughout this entire process has not only been, pavement markings and that transitioning conditions, but also just very clearly marking it with the signage. And when we were talking about signage before, we were not only talking about, identification of the trails and kind of wayfinding signage in terms of, how to continue on the trail and what amenities and assets are in and around. But we're also talking about kind of the regulatory signage to indicate to bike users, to indicate to motorists what the conditions are coming up and where they're supposed to go. So that way it makes it clear for all users. Again, one of our objectives, again, was to make sure that we are making it clear to all users, how they are going from point A to point B.
Arthur, you mentioned there's a question on Facebook Live.
Yeah, another question that was brought up was related to the overlook. And I guess I'm going to allow either Rich or even Jim to comment here as well. So the overlook was stemmed from the Rocky River Master Plan. It was an element of the master plan that was discussed through the engagement and the planning process with that master plan. So in the very early stages of our planning process, like we were saying before, we were going through all the existing plans, which included the plans for the city of Lakewood, plans for Cleveland Metro Parks, and specifically the Rocky River Reservation, the Cuyahoga Greenways plan, as well as the City of Rocky River's master plan. And so we had seen not only the recommendation of the all-purpose trail / shared use path for or along Wooster Road, but also the opportunity that arose here for the overlook. So we felt that through our process, there was a lot of discussion and I guess excitement, for lack of a better term. You know, again, Rich or Jim can maybe more clearly describe that, but there was still excitement for that idea. So we wanted to kind of take that to the next step and maybe see how that overlook could be realized, and maybe a potential location for that in collaboration with that shared use path or that all-purpose trail along that. So just wanted to make that clarification. Again, Jim or Rich, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that or expand upon that.
Yeah,
go ahead, Rich. Okay, I'll go. Yeah, I would just want to say that these are ideas, everything that you see in the master plan, it's, you know, great ideas like this come from the community. And really, we had such an extensive dialogue to kind of tease out these ideas and you know, have good conversations with community stakeholders to see, you know, how we can make ideas like this real. So that, you know, this is obviously conceptual, and we all know that geographically it's a very challenging area with with areas where there just aren't a lot of, there's not enough room to really put things. So we were just looking at areas along Wooster Road here where it could be feasible and, you know, really offer a spot for the community or anybody to stop, to pause, and just to take in really beautiful views up and down the valley. And you'll see, you know, in the Cuyahoga Valley, like by Sokolowski's University Inn, the new overlooks that are there that really just generate a lot of traffic, a lot of interest, where people are off hiking and biking and, you know, enjoy the moment in spots like this that are just really unique. Rich?
You nailed it, Jim. So, I mean, again, like you already stated, you know, this would be just, you know, a spectator's paradise to see just the beauty down below, and something that we would be able to incorporate along this multi-use trail just to really draw people, you know, from the neighborhood as well as other parts, you know, in the region to take a look at, you know, the river below, and you know, obviously you have the beautiful marina and everything down below too. So it's something that, you know, is definitely a priority.
I think too, to build very quickly, to build on that, Rich and Jim, it was not only through the master plan, but, you know, through the project team. So the individuals see here on the screen, when we were doing that field audit, there was several different comments about opportunities for these type of overlooks, right? Looking back into the Rocky River Valley. And so I think, and Matt, if I recall correctly, I think it was maybe our first virtual engagement or first webinar, we had talked about potential opportunities throughout this Rocky River Valley for those overlooks, and then began to kind of narrow in on, again, where can we kind of create that synergy that's existing of projects that we're talking about already, such as the Detroit Road Bridge, which offers an opportunity to kind of overlook into the reservation, and where there was synergy from other existing projects or plans, such as the Rocky River Master Plan for this Wooster Road overlook.
Yes, speaking of overlooks, one thing that I failed to mention when we were talking about the Clifton Boulevard Bridge short-term and long-term options is the long-term one, if everybody recalls, is a pretty dramatic change to just 2 lanes, one in each direction. And then the whole other side of the bridge is allocated toward pedestrian and cyclist use. Well, there's so much room over there that the entire bridge then could become an overlook, because you have lots of extra room there for the pedestrian zone. So that's yet another overlook that would be really fun to have. I mean, you can do it now, but it's not a very comfortable experience because the sidewalks are, I think, only 8 feet wide, and you have cars directly next to you going quite fast because it feels like a highway, so it feels like you can drive 50 miles an hour. And so it's not very comfortable for pedestrians at this time. Arthur, I understand that there's a question about West Clifton and the lane width.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Yes. So a question we received is within the West Clifton street section. The question was, are 13.5-foot wide street lanes required for West Clifton? So I'm going to go to that here.
I know we had discussed at one point during the project the fact of whether Clifton, I think Clifton is a state route, and Caitlin, if you can recall for us, what did we determine that route requirements are for lane width? Does that ring a bell?
West Clifton in a lot of sections is actually 11 feet required. So it isn't required to be 13 feet, but we've gone back and forth a lot in this section and determined that the parking is needed. And fitting a bike lane next to parking, it would be a 7-foot parking with a 4-foot bike lane. It just wasn't a safe condition that we were creating. So putting the Sharrows on a wider lane was determined to be the best option for now. And then using that shared use path as more of the bike route eventually. We looked at options to get rid of parking and widen the bike paths too, but based on a parking survey in that area, it was really challenging to eliminate parking on West Boulevard at this time.
And I think, Matt, I mean, I think this one highlights a bit too of kind of the balance that we were throughout this project seeking to create amongst all the users, right? I think, Caitlin, you highlighted it perfectly right there of, could you fit a bike lane there? Technically, yes. Would it be the smartest and safest implementation of a bike lane there? Probably not, right? So looking at the safety for all users, we felt that the shared, I think collectively as a team, we felt that the shared use path, the all-purpose trail, made for a better recommendation and a safer recommendation for all users along this corridor to, again, continue creating that connective network, right? And continuing to be able to move the users safely throughout. It doesn't preclude, examining this further down the road as tendencies change, as the situation adjusts itself. I'm sure if you would talk to maybe some of us, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, the discussions that we're having right now maybe seemed a little far-fetched on some of these corridors and with some of these recommendations and facilities that we're talking about. So, again, looking at it within the prism of the here and now, and with the eye towards meaningful implementation, meaning how can we collectively see this done, not 20 years from now, but within a reasonable time frame. Again, going back to the first two questions we discussed about what is that time frame, right, for implementation of these projects. And that was, well, maybe not a clearly stated goal when we were talking about it early on, a very clear goal from day one for this project was, what are the steps that, what are the things that we can do that we can get things done sooner rather than later? And I think Caitlin and Rich, you both addressed that as, utilizing this plan and this process and the results and recommendations that come out of it to guide those decisions moving forward for both the cities of Lakewood and Rocky River. And to Kelly, not to take away anything from Cleveland Metro Parks, but also to help guide the decision-making for Cleveland Metro Parks in terms of recommendations, implementation, and that coordination.
There are a few additional comments on the chat about the overlooks. And indeed, it's so easy for us who live next to the Rocky River and see it every day to take it for granted. But it is an absolutely stunning view when you can look down into the river valley and you can watch the wildlife. I live nearby the Hilliard Road Bridge, actually, and there is a crew of folks who go to the bridge daily to watch the peregrine falcons. And my understanding is that they've even named the falcons. They have that much of a relationship with the falcons, and they love to watch them. This natural asset that we have here, just like Lake Erie, is something that unfortunately we take for granted because we're by it every day. But these overlooks really are an opportunity to capitalize on this natural asset and actually can become an economic driver for both cities and for Cleveland Metro Parks. So certainly, you know, an overlook might seem like a supercilious use of money, but I argue that it's a very smart investment for the future of both cities and Metro Parks.
Just to build on that, Matt, too, I mean, I moved up to the Clifton Boulevard Bridge section, again, looking eastbound. So again, being purposeful with where that additional sidewalk and buffer is, again, due to the views, looking out from this bridgescape was part of the thinking, the thought process here for this section.
Right.
The same can also be said if we, excuse me for kind of quickly going through, but even for the Riverside, as we talk about Riverside and as we talk about Hogsback Lane, even being very purposeful of the reason we were kind of setting the initially the two-way separated bike lane, and then in the future the shared use path / all-purpose trail along the western side of Riverside Drive, where you have that view into the Rocky River Valley. Now, not saying to stop right on the path and create a backup to look in, but as you are a user, as you're cycling down there or as you're running down there or what have you, you have those views back into the Rocky River Valley. So while in these two indications, there's not that formal overlook that we were showing on Booster Road or on the Detroit Road Bridge, we were also thinking holistically on some of these sections of how do you maximize that great beauty that you have there with the Rocky River Reservation. And I'm sure to a certain degree, many of us have been hearing this over and over again, but you know, one of the positives I think that we can take out of this global pandemic is that there's been a greater appreciation for public space in general and natural space even more so. We have this beautiful asset here within our area, within our region in the Rocky River Valley and the reservation. So how do we maximize its beauty, and how do we get more eyes viewing this natural feature that we have here?
No, I think the comments, the Q&A and the chat has died down. So does anybody have any closing comments they need to make? Oh, Arthur, you wanted to talk about next steps and how we're just close this out, right?
Yeah, very quickly before we ask, and maybe this way it gives everybody an opportunity to set up their closing comments if you have one. I see Rich laughing over there. He always knows we like to pick on him in these. It's typically it's Kelly, and I don't know, we've shifted over to Rich now in picking on when we call people out. But very quickly, as I scroll down to it, I just want to remind everyone, for those of you who are watching with us now, we greatly appreciate the time that you've taken to join us this evening. But for those of you who are maybe going to be watching us tomorrow or the next day, either through the project website or through the County Planning Facebook page, I just want to bring up here, this is the project website, countyplanning.us/project/community confluence. On there, you're going to see the recording, not only of this presentation, but I believe, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, we still have our previous recordings up there on the website as well. For individuals who maybe want to catch up, you can see those first two recordings that we were talking about, and you can hear some of the dialogue and conversation that we had in those presentations. So again, this presentation will be up there. Have the opportunity, obviously, to view it. We'll be putting up there the opportunity to submit your responses to those survey questions that you saw us do live with your priorities. And then with, again, if you had to choose one of the plan recommendation projects to be implemented within the next 2 to 3 years, which that would be, and then submit any general comments to us. So that'll be up on the project website. You will see that on the Facebook page. So if you're viewing us here non-live, make sure you get a chance to submit that for us. If you are joining us here and you know there's somebody who is interested in this or would be interested in this, please share with them. Please share them the project website, the information on the Facebook page, so they have the opportunity to kind of see what's been going on and give their input and feedback. Next steps after this, we're going to be taking in the comments that have been given to us both through this presentation and the days following here, and then kind of over the holidays and into the new year, bringing all those comments in, finalizing the recommendations that we presented to you this evening, and then finalizing our draft report, which the project team will be reviewing. And then as Rich and Caitlin from Rocky River and the City of Lakewood respectively, and Kelly from Metro Parks, and even Jim Sonhalter from the county indicated, those entities will be then using that document and those recommendations to develop their next steps and recommendations moving forward, looking for funding opportunities, so on and so forth. So just want to remind you all of that. So with that, Rich, Kelly, Caitlin, Jim, anyone have any closing remarks or any statements before you go? Kelly's good to go. She's like, I'm good. I'm good.
Arthur, I'm on our website right now and just wanted to confirm that the first two presentations are there and available for viewing. And my email is also on there, so people can just reach out to me directly with any questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim, for that. Rich?
I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to come out tonight. It's definitely the involvement from the community that helps us guide our projects going forward. I'm going to plan to share this information on our city's social media, and then hopefully we get some more involvement there. But again, just thank everybody for their time.
And I think that's a good point. Really quick, Rich, good point. I mean, this is kind of non-traditional way that we're doing this type of engagement through the field audits, the interactive surveys, and these webinars. So I think you hit the nail on the head. We've had really good interactions with individuals, and hope to continue to have those really good interactions here as we finalize these plan recommendations and kind of build this report. If anybody else, if no one else has any other thoughts or comments, just in closing, again, thank you everybody for participating this evening and for joining us, especially challenging during the holiday season with still lots going on, including the pandemic, but including everything else trying to get ready for. So we greatly appreciate it. Again, go to the County Planning Project website on your screen or through the Facebook page to interact with us, submit any other additional questions. And Matt, unless you have anything else.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Again, have a great night. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.